What would you do if the person who felt like your first true love had to walk away because of a promise made before you even met? Would you fight to keep them, or would you let them go? These questions filled my mind when I thought about Lucas and the weeks that changed everything in my life. The bus shook as it turned along the wet coastal road. The smell of salt water came through the open window, and the evening sky was turning darker with every mile. I pressed my forehead against the glass and looked at the town growing closer. It had been months since I left home, and I felt restless, as if something new was waiting for me. My mother had called 5 times that day, asking when I would arrive. Her voice was warm, but there was something hidden in it, something I could not name. I told myself she was only excited to see me, but deep inside, I knew there was more. When the bus stopped, I pulled my suitcase and stepped down into the cool air. My mother stood near the station entrance. She waved as soon as she saw me and rushed into my arms. She held me longer than usual, as if she did not want to let go. "Clara, you are finally here," she said, her voice full of emotion. I smiled, but I also felt curious. Why was she so different this time? We walked quickly through the narrow streets toward home, and I kept asking her questions about the garden, the neighbors, and her health. She answered, but her mind seemed elsewhere. Before we continue, I would love to know something from you. Where are you listening from right now? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please remember to subscribe, like, and come back for more stories every week. We reached the house, and my mother opened the door. I was ready to drop my suitcase and sit on the sofa, but then I stopped. At the dining table sat a young man I had never seen before. He stood up the moment he noticed me. His chair moved back with care, as if he did not want to disturb anything around him. He smiled politely and said hello in a soft voice. My mother's eyes were bright as she looked between us. "Clara, this is Lucas. He will stay here for some time." I greeted him quickly and went upstairs to put my things away. My heart was beating faster than usual, but I could not explain why. My mother was not the type of woman who invited strangers into our home. She loved her quiet life and always said she preferred to live alone with me. So why was Lucas here? I unpacked my clothes and tried to calm my thoughts, but that question kept coming back again and again. The next morning, I went to the kitchen to make tea. Lucas was already there, helping my mother with breakfast. He moved carefully, handing her plates and asking where to put things. He looked at me with that same polite smile, and for a second, our eyes met. I felt something, but I turned away quickly. My mother, however, seemed pleased. Later, she explained that Lucas had lost his father a few months ago. He needed a quiet place to stay while he finished his studies. Then she added words that surprised me. "Clara, treat him like family." Nothing more. I wanted to ask why she said that, but her face was firm. At first, I tried to avoid him. When he came home from classes, I stayed in my room. When he was in the kitchen, I found a reason to be somewhere else. But our house was small, and it was impossible not to see each other. I began to notice things about him. He thanked my mother for every meal. He always carried his books with care, as if they were treasures. And when he thought nobody was watching, his face turned quiet and far away, like he was living in 2 worlds at once. One afternoon, my mother asked me to go to the market. Before I could answer, she said, "Take Lucas with you. He will help." I wanted to protest, but she looked at me in a way that made it impossible to say no. So Lucas and I walked together to the town square. At first, the silence between us was heavy. I asked him about his classes, and he answered with short words. I told him about the bakery I loved, and he only smiled. But then, at the fruit stall, something changed. I argued with the seller about the price of apples, and Lucas suddenly laughed. His laugh was warm and real, and it surprised me. From that moment, the silence broke. We walked through the stalls, choosing bread, vegetables, and cheese. He told me he missed his father's cooking and that his favorite food was a simple soup. I told him about the bakery near the school, where I used to buy cakes as a child. He listened with attention, as if every detail mattered. When we returned home, my mother's eyes were brighter than before. She asked about our trip, but she looked at Lucas more than at me. That night, I could not sleep. I kept remembering his laugh at the market, the way it made him look younger, less heavy. It was the first time I thought that maybe he was not only sad, maybe there was more inside him than the silence he carried. The days that followed made it harder to ignore what I was feeling. Lucas and I began to cross paths more often. Once I found him reading in the garden, and he offered me the chair beside him. Another time he carried heavy bags for me without asking. Each small moment added something new to my heart. I tried to remind myself of my mother's words, but it was no use. Something stronger than logic was growing between us. One evening, my mother had a headache and asked Lucas and me to buy bread from the bakery. The sky was already dark when we walked back. The lamps lit the narrow streets, and our shadows moved side by side on the walls. For the first time, Lucas spoke about his father. He told me how much he missed him, how hard it was to live without him, and how lost he sometimes felt. His voice was low, and his eyes looked far away, but I could hear the truth in every word. I listened closely, and when he finished, I felt tears in my own eyes. That night, as I lay in bed, I knew something had changed. I was no longer only curious about him. I was falling in love, and in my heart, I believed that he felt the same. The sound of rain against my window woke me. Early the next morning, the sky was heavy and gray, and I could hear the waves crashing hard against the shore. I dressed quickly and went downstairs. Lucas was already there, standing near the door with his shoes in his hand. He looked surprised when he saw me. "You are awake early," I said, trying to sound casual. "I like walking in the rain," he answered softly. "It clears my head." I watched him leave, water already falling on his shoulders as he stepped outside. For a moment, I stood frozen. Something about him walking into that storm made me want to follow. I put on my coat and ran after him. The streets were almost empty. Rain fell on the stones and made them shine under the dim light. Lucas slowed his steps when he heard me behind him. "You did not have to come," he said. "I wanted to," I replied. "I like walking in the rain too." We walked side by side, our coats dark with water. At first we said nothing, but slowly words came. He told me that the rain reminded him of his father. They used to walk together on days like this, talking about school, about the future, about dreams that now seemed far away. His voice was calm, but I could feel his pain. I listened and said nothing because I knew that sometimes silence was the only true answer. When we returned home, we were wet and cold. My mother looked at us with sharp eyes, but she said nothing. She gave us towels and hot tea. I noticed the way she watched us, her lips pressed tight, as if she held back words. Later that day, while Lucas studied in his room, my mother called me into the kitchen. She spoke in a low voice. "Clara, I want you to remember what I told you. Treat him like family. Do not let your heart go where it should not." Her warning made me angry. "Why do you say this? He is kind. He is respectful. Why are you so against him?" She sighed but did not explain. "Please trust me, Clara. Some things you do not understand yet." I left the kitchen with my heart burning. Her words only made me want to be closer to him. The days passed, and I found myself thinking about Lucas all the time. We spent hours together, often without planning it. Sometimes we walked by the sea after dinner, watching the lights of fishing boats in the distance. Other times we sat in the small garden, speaking about books or music. He had a soft laugh that appeared rarely, but when it did, it warmed me more than the sun. One evening, we sat on the old wooden bench in the garden. The moon was high, and the air was cool. I told him about my childhood, about how my father died when I was young, and how my mother worked hard to raise me. He listened closely, his eyes on mine. "I know how it feels to lose someone too soon," he said. "Sometimes the world feels empty, but then you meet someone who makes it full again." My breath caught at his words. For a long moment we sat in silence. Then I felt his hand touch mine. It was a small touch, light and unsure, but it sent fire through me. I turned to him and our eyes met. The world around us disappeared. That night, lying in my bed, I could not sleep. I replayed the moment again and again. I was sure of it now. I loved him, and I believed he loved me too. But happiness never stays untouched. The next day, when I came downstairs, I found Lucas speaking quietly with my mother. Their faces were serious, and when they saw me, they stopped. My mother's eyes followed me as if she wanted to warn me again. Lucas gave me a look I could not read. Later, when we walked to the bakery, I asked him about it. "What were you and my mother talking about this morning?" He hesitated. "Nothing important," he said quickly. "She only worries about you." I wanted to ask more, but his tone closed the door. I felt a stone of doubt settle inside me. The following week, the bond between us grew stronger, yet I felt a strange distance at times. Lucas was gentle, but sometimes I caught him lost in thought, his eyes far away. Once, when we walked along the shore, he suddenly stopped and stared at the horizon. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. He shook his head. "It is nothing. I have things I cannot forget." I wanted to push him to tell me, but his face was pale and tense. I let it go, though the question stayed with me. A few days later, everything changed. It was evening, and my mother had gone to visit a neighbor. Lucas and I sat in the garden again. The air smelled of salt and flowers, and the sky was painted with the last light of sunset. I turned to him, my heart racing. "Lucas, I cannot keep this inside anymore," I said, my voice shaking. "I care for you. I think about you all the time. I feel something I have never felt before. I believe I am in love with you." For a long moment, he said nothing. His face was unreadable, his eyes filled with pain. I waited, my heart beating hard. Finally, he spoke. "Clara, I care for you too, more than I should. You have brought light into my days, and I will never forget it." But his voice broke, and he looked away. "I cannot give you what you want." My chest tightened. "Why not? If you feel the same, why not?" He shook his head slowly. Because before I met you, I made a promise. It was the last thing my father asked of me before he died. I promised to look after someone, and one day to marry her. Her name is Elena. She is part of my family, and she depends on me. I cannot break that promise, Clara, not even for love. His words struck me like a wave pulling me underwater. I stared at him, unable to speak. My heart wanted to scream, but my voice was lost. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "So all this time," I whispered, "you knew this? You knew there was no future for us?" Tears filled his eyes. I tried to stop myself. I told myself I must not fall for you, but I failed. I do love you, Clara, but love cannot erase duty. I cannot betray my father's last wish. I turned away, my eyes burning. The night around us was silent except for the sound of the sea. I felt as if the ground under me had broken. When my mother returned later that night, she found me in my room, crying quietly into my pillow. She sat beside me and stroked my hair. "I warned you," she said gently. "I told you to protect your heart." "You knew," I said through tears. "You knew about his promise." She nodded slowly. "Yes, he told me when he first came. That is why I asked you to keep your distance. I wanted to protect you from this pain." Her words cut deep, but I could not blame her. The pain was already mine, heavy and endless. From that night on, everything changed between Lucas and me. We still saw each other in the house, we still shared meals, but the air was full of unspoken words. Every smile hurt. Every glance reminded me of what could never be. He carried his promise like a chain, and I carried my love like a wound. I lay awake each night, asking myself the same question. Was love stronger than duty, or was duty stronger than love? The days after Lucas confessed his promise were some of the hardest of my life. The house felt smaller, as if the walls themselves knew our secret. Each meal became an exercise in silence. My mother spoke about the weather, the neighbors, or the price of fish at the market, but her eyes often moved between us with quiet worry. Lucas tried to act normal, but I could see the struggle in his face. He carried his books and helped with chores. But every time our hands brushed, every time our eyes met, I felt the truth pressing down on us both. We loved each other, but we could not change the past. I tried to stay busy. I cleaned my room, visited old friends in town, and even helped my mother with her garden. But no matter what I did, my thoughts returned to him. I remembered our walks by the sea, our talks in the garden, and the way his laugh made my heart lighter. It was like trying to forget the sound of the ocean while living next to it. Impossible. One evening, my mother told me she was visiting her friend Margaret, who lived across town. She asked if I wanted to come, but I refused. I said I was tired and needed rest. The truth was different. I wanted to be alone with Lucas, even if it meant more pain. After she left, the house grew quiet. Lucas was reading in the living room, and I sat near the window, pretending to look outside. Finally, I spoke. "Lucas, will you sit with me in the garden?" He hesitated, then closed his book and followed me outside. The air was cool, and the moon was almost full. We sat on the same old bench where our story had begun. For a while, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the distant crash of waves against the shore. "Lucas," I whispered, "why must promises rule our lives? You are here, I am here. Why can love not be enough?" His face was heavy with sorrow. "Because a promise is more than words. It is trust. It is duty. My father asked me to take care of Elena. She has no one else. If I leave her, she will be alone. I cannot do that to her. I felt anger rise in me. And what about me? Do you not see my heart? Do you not see my pain? Am I less important than a promise made to someone you do not even love? He looked away, his jaw tight. It is not about who I love more. It is about what is right. Sometimes love must step aside for duty. His words cut through me. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him choose me. Instead, tears filled my eyes, and I could only whisper, I wish I had met you first, before all of this. Then maybe we could have had a chance. He reached for my hand, and for a moment I let him hold it. His touch was warm, but it felt like goodbye. I pulled my hand away and walked back into the house. The following days were full of tension. My mother knew something had changed, but she did not ask. She only gave me gentle looks and told me to eat more, to rest more, to take care of myself. Lucas kept his distance. He spoke to me politely but avoided being alone with me. It was as if he was building a wall between us, brick by brick. Then one night, everything reached its end. My mother had gone to bed early, and I was sitting in my room, trying to read. Suddenly, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. A knock came at my door. Clara, may I speak with you? It was Lucas. I opened the door, and he stood there, his face pale but determined. Please come to the garden, he said. I followed him outside. The night was quiet, the sky filled with stars. He stopped near the bench and turned to me. His voice shook as he spoke. Clara, I need to tell you something. Tomorrow I am leaving. Elena's family has written to me. They need me to go to her. The time has come for me to keep my promise. My breath caught. I felt as if the ground had disappeared under my feet. You are leaving? I whispered. He nodded. Yeah, I must go. I cannot stay here and hurt you more. You deserve peace, not this endless waiting. Tears burned my eyes. And what about love? What about what we shared? Are you going to throw it away like it meant nothing? His face twisted with pain. It meant everything. You are the light in my darkest days, Clara. But sometimes even love is not enough. I cannot break the promise that defines who I am. If I did, I would no longer be the man you love. His words were heavy, but I could not accept them. I stepped closer, my hands trembling. Lucas, listen to me. Promises are made by people, and people can change. Your father is gone. He cannot ask you to give up your own life. Choose me. Stay with me. Please. He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes shining with tears. Then he shook his head slowly. If I choose you, I betray the last words of my father. I cannot live with that. I cannot be that man. I felt my heart break inside my chest. So this is it? You are leaving me, not because you want to, but because of a promise you cannot let go? Yes, he whispered, because of a promise. I turned away, unable to look at him. The night air felt colder, sharper. My tears fell freely, and no words could stop them. After a long silence, I heard him step back. Goodbye, Clara, he said softly. Then his footsteps faded into the house. That night I did not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my heart aching with every beat. I thought about running after him, about begging him one last time, but I knew it would not change his choice. He had decided, and nothing could break the chains of duty he carried. The next morning, when I went downstairs, his room was empty. His books were gone, his bag missing. My mother stood in the kitchen, her face pale. He left at dawn, she said quietly. "He asked me to tell you that he wishes you happiness." I sat at the table, numb. The chair beside me was empty, and it would remain that way. My first love had chosen duty over me, and I was left with only memories. Days turned into weeks, and life moved on, but the wound inside me remained. Sometimes I walked by the sea, hoping to see him again, but he never returned. My mother tried to comfort me, saying that time would heal my heart. I wanted to believe her, but some nights, when the wind howled through the streets, I still heard his voice in my mind. I often thought of his words, that love must sometimes step aside for duty. I hated them, yet I understood. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps life is not only about what we want, but also about the promises we make. Still, in the quiet of the night, I whispered to myself the truth I could not escape. He was my first love, and even if he chose duty, he would always be the memory I carried, the wound I both hated and cherished. And so I learned that love is not always enough to keep someone with you. Sometimes love must let go. Sometimes love must watch as the person you want walks away, not because they do not care, but because life has tied them to another path. That was the night he chose duty, and it was the night I learned the true meaning of heartbreak. If you have ever loved someone you could not keep, then you understand my pain. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you ask him to stay or let him go? Please share your thoughts below, and do not forget to subscribe and like this story so you can hear more every week.